In this video, I'll be covering how to optimize the BOVPN settings on your firebox in order to increase performance. This process can be done using the WatchGuard Cloud Management interface if you are configuring the VPN to a third-party device. It can also be done in the Fireware web UI, as well as the WSM Policy Manager. For this example, I will be using a BOVPN virtual interface since that is the recommended method to build a VPN these days. Before we jump into the encryption settings, I do want to point out that when you are using a pre-shared key for the credential or authentication method on the VPN, you'll want to make sure that this pre-shared key is at least 20 characters long for security reasons. Of course, you can go much longer, but the longer the key, the more secure it will be. Alternatively, you can use a certificate, but of course you would need to set up the local PKI to do that or purchase a new certificate. In any case, moving along, I will start with the Phase 1 settings. And the first thing you're going to want to change here is the IKE version. What you are seeing here are the current defaults on any Firebox device. But IKE v1 has a variety of issues when it comes to tunnel negotiation and performance. Furthermore, if you're using anything besides main mode, there is a security risk involved with this given the age of the protocol. So I will change this to IKE v2. And that eliminates a lot of the other settings that are already built into the IKE v2 protocol. Moving on down to the bottom, we'll look at the Phase 1 transform settings. The current defaults here are the bare minimum for security these days, but I'm going to go ahead and remove this, and then I will add a new set of transforms. When it comes to Phase 1, you can crank up these values quite a bit because the Phase 1 settings aren't necessarily going to impact the throughput of the BOVPN. This is going to be for that initial handshake to validate the endpoints. So you can use pretty much anything you want here, but using something that's higher security is fine because it shouldn't have an adverse impact on performance. The first thing I'm going to do is actually change the encryption type, and I will pick one of the AES GCM options. In this case, I'll go with the highest value of 256. You'll notice that when I selected that, the authentication algorithm disappeared. In other interfaces, it may just become grayed out. And that's because AES GCM already includes authentication that's built into that protocol. So this will still offer good security, but it will bring down that encryption overhead a bit. The SI life I won't adjust. 24 hours is typically fine to automatically renegotiate, but the key group here is defaulted to 14, which is the minimum secure version for Diffie-Hellman these days. Anything below 14 is no longer secure, but I want to use something a little stronger. In this case, I'm going to choose group 21, which is the newest and strongest of the Diffie-Hellman groups we support on the Firebox. Be aware that groups 19, 20, and 21 are all elliptic curve groups, which typically offer better encryption strength as well as improved performance over the traditional Mod P groups. Once I've configured that, I'll go ahead and click OK. And then I'll move along to the Phase 2 settings. And here you can see the first option is for perfect forward secrecy. You typically want to leave this enabled for security purposes, but if your box is really being just burdened and load, you might need to disable this in order to increase the performance, but I would not recommend that typically. What I would recommend instead is change this from group 14, which is again the minimum security, up to group 19, which is still an elliptic curve group as mentioned earlier, but this will actually be faster and more secure than group 14 on most Firebox models. And then moving along down here, I will select the current IPsec proposal and remove it. And then I will click the drop-down list, and here you can see some pre-made proposals that are available. Otherwise, you can create your own. But for now, I'm going to choose the AES 128 GCM option. Keep in mind here that the Phase 2 settings are where you're going to see the biggest impact to your BOVPN throughput. This is why I'm choosing stuff that is still secure but less computationally intensive on the Firebox. Furthermore, because I'm using 128 versus 256, it also means that the packet padding will be smaller, which could lead to lower fragmentation of your data packets going through the tunnel, which is another way to improve performance. Using a combination of Diffie-Hellman Group 19 and AES GCM 128 should give me the best performance on most firebox models. I'll go ahead and click Add to put that in the list. And that's pretty much it for the configuration piece, but what I do want to point out here is that different models, of course, have different hardware. So you may need to test different proposals and different Diffie-Hellman groups on your fireboxes to figure out which ones work best. But even the combination I have here should offer better security and better performance on most models compared to the default settings. To wrap things up, if you are changing settings on any existing BOVPNs that you have configured, remember to save the changes on the remote endpoint first. You'll definitely want to double check everything, make sure it is set up the way you expect it, and then once those changes are validated, go ahead and save them. Of course, the tunnel will go down, but then you'll still have access to your local device, so you can make the corresponding changes there, and then the tunnel should come right back up after those changes are saved. In general, the AES GCM and the elliptic curve Diffie-Hellman groups offer better performance as well as better security. But of course, you want to test the different encryption options because different firebox hardware may perform differently with certain ciphers versus others. So figure out what works best in your environment. What I put in this video is just a general guideline that works for most models, but you may see different results depending on what you're running. For more information about branch office VPNs, please check out the WatchGuard Technical Search.